since it's been, I think, 2 or 3 weeks since we studied. So just a very general recap. We spoke about how there are 3 garments to the soul: thought, speech, and action. And those garments are garments that enable the soul to find its ultimate expression, its ultimate divine expression. We also spoke about in the realm of action, we have the 613 commandments, and how when we do a mitzvah, then we are aligning that part of the body that we are using to do that mitzvah with God himself. And the ultimate goal is to perform all these 613 commandments that relate to different parts of the body so that we can be entirely, wholly aligned with God himself. We also spoke about how the 613 commandments are divided into 2. There are 248 positive commandments, 365 negative commandments. The 248 positive commandments are commandments of actions, which we have to take an active role. 365 is what negative commandments are, the ones that we have to refrain from doing. And now we're entering this idea of what lies at the essence of the negative commandments. What lies at the essence? What stops me from doing something that I want? What stops me from from transgressing one of those 365 commandments? So we spoke about this general idea of yirah. If what propels me towards positive, towards doing the 248 commandments is love, is ahava, what stops me from doing anything negative is yirah. What is yirah? So we translated it that as fear, and we said that that already is not a good translation. Maybe awe is a better translation. Now he went to, we just started speaking about 2 types of yirah, of fear, of awe, of shame, of humility, the different translations to this word. One is yirat romemut. Another one is yirat boshet. Yirat romemut is where I fear God. I fear his punishment, maybe. I do it mainly because of me, of caring about me, not too much caring about God. God might punish me, so I'm not going to do it. But at the end of the day, if that's what you're saying, then who do you care about? You, your repercussions, your punishment. So you don't do it not because you care too much about God, but because you care more about your good life. So that's yirat romemut. Now, again, that's a legitimate type of yirah. That's just fine. But of course, the ultimate goal is to achieve the higher types of yirah, because at the end of the day, we're in a relationship with God. And that relationship is a relationship just like any other relationship that has to include the other in it, not just me. If I'm in a relationship just because of my personal pleasures, because of my personal ego of what's good for me and what's not good for me, and I don't care about that, then it's not a relationship. God seeks a relationship with us. Our soul seeks a relationship with God. And therefore, that first type of yirah, which is pretty selfish and self-centered, is not the ultimate type of yirah, even though if that's going to stop you from sin, great. But the second type of yirah is what we call yirat aboshet, which means the awe of shame, of embarrassment. What boshet means embarrassment in Hebrew. And that is because in a way, when I perform a sin, it creates embarrassment to not just me and my stature, but also to me and my relationship with God. I'm embarrassed because I know I love this person. I'm not embarrassed by a wall, not embarrassed by a chair, because I have no relationship with that chair. If I perform a sin on a chair, so what? That chair is a chair. I don't care about it. I have no relationship with it. But if I am in a relationship with God and I perform a sin, I transgress one of those 365 prohibitions, then because of that relationship with God, I'm a little bit ashamed. I say, gosh, I know God is there, and that hurt my relationship. God didn't want me to do this, and I did it anyway. So that yirat boshet is the first type of yirah in which we actually see that there is a relationship there. It's not just about me and the repercussions that can hurt me, but it's really about God and the relationship. And I'm embarrassed because I recognize that God is there as my partner, as my other subject in this relationship. So that's yirat boshet. And just to repeat these concluding words about yirat boshet, then we'll continue here in the middle of page 129, quoting Rabbi Steinsier quotes Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, that it is told of him that as a young child, whenever he did or thought of doing something wrong, he would blush in shame before God. Again, because again, you recognize that God is there. He's there with you. He's holding your hand at every step of your life, all the time. He's in a way recreating you all the time. So we say in the prayer, God renews. You know, we just read about the creation of the world yesterday, but it's not just a creation that happened 5,781 years ago, but it's a creation that happens each and every moment. God recreates us each and every day. We recognize that that's the type of relationship we have with God. And therefore, when we do something wrong, we have this little shame because God is an integral part of our recreation at every moment. Okay, let's continue here in the middle of page 129, unless, of course, there's any comments, questions.
Could you just repeat the first yirat again?
Yirat Romemut, which means the awe of loftiness, but it's the lowliest type of yira in which I say, you know what, I'm not going to do this because it's going to cause me harm. Not really because I care about God, not because I care about my relationship with God, not because I even recognize that God might be in the picture right now. Yeah. Okay.
Just one other thing.
Yeah.
It would seem it's not only that you want that relationship with God, but in order to have that, you need to have that relationship with yourself.
Right.
And it becomes very difficult to have a relationship with your God without knowing who you are.
Right. Good point, Ronnie. But I'm going to add to that. What does it mean to have a relationship with yourself? It essentially also means to have a relationship with God, because the most essential part of yourself is God.
Okay.
Is divinity. So you're right. You're right. Well said. But that's the ultimate type of relationship with oneself, where we have a relationship with the God in me. Yeah. By the way, I like the new hairstyle, Ronnie. No beard today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Good way to start a new year.
That's it. Fresh.
Fresh. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Okay. Middle of page 129. Does anyone want to read? Anyone?
I'll read.
Please,
Okay.
Marla, please.
And do what is evil in his eyes, namely any of the abominable things hated by God, which are klipot and sitra achra, which draw their nurture from terrestrial man and have their hold in him through his violation of the 365 prohibitive commands.
Right. So let's continue. Rabbi Schnauz explains this beautifully. Go ahead.
Okay. An evil deed is not merely an act that is contrary to a system of conventions. Evil is evil in essence. The evil deed is a deed that nourishes the cosmic evil, a conduit that feeds power and vitality to klipa. The existence of evil is inherent in the nature of the creation, but its nourishment comes from earthly man.
Right. Let's stop here. Let's just explain. So it's not that evil is an independent force, as other religions would argue. You know, for example, in Christianity, the Satan is separate from God. It has an independent will and independent power. And we don't believe that. We believe that God created evil. So eventually, the creator of evil, the controller of evil, is God himself. God can eradicate evil just as well as he created it. And we believe that in times of Mashiach, God will eradicate this evil because he's the creator and the sole power really in this world, or in all worlds. But nonetheless, God created bad. God created evil. It's a verse in Isaiah. It's a verse that we say each and every day in the prayer, and we beautified it. But if you think about this, the real verse is that God created evil. What verse am I saying? So if you're familiar with the prayer, immediately after Yishtabach, we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvoreh choshech, oseh shalom, uvoreh et hakol. That's again, we say this every single morning. What does this mean? Blessed is God, King of the universe, that created light and created darkness, or formed light and created darkness. Yotzer or uvoreh choshech, oseh shalom, he makes peace, uvoreh et hakol, and he creates everything. That last part of the blessing is really misquoted, because the whole entire blessing is a verse in Isaiah. I don't remember exactly where in Isaiah, but it's a verse in Isaiah. And there it says, not uvoreh takod, that God created everything, but it says that God created uvoreh tara. God created bad. God creates bad. Why? That's a whole different department. That's a whole different discussion. The main reason, and we can go into this a different time or whenever, but The main reason is to give a person the freedom of choice. If God did not create bad, if bad would not lure us, evil would not lure us, then we wouldn't have the freedom of choice. We'd be robots. That's not the purpose of creation. So in order to create freedom of choice, God created evil. Now, evil, as it's may not have its independent power, but evil certainly has its independent energy. Now, what I mean by that is that a person with that freedom of choice can decide, am I aligning myself with the positive energy of God or with the negative energy of God, the negative energy of this world? By doing a mitzvah, you really are absorbing positive energy, and that eventually emanates from you. When you are doing an avera, a sin, you're absorbing negative energy that emanates from that bad, that evil that God created, and eventually that too emanates from you. Now, each time we do a mitzvah, again, we have light, we create light, and we emanate light. When we do an avera, it's the opposite. We emanate darkness. And in a way, I think the righteous can see that. I mean, the holy people certainly can see, people who are covered with light, or God forbid, covered with other things. We have it within us. There's a scientific study about this. And I dare you to Google this afterwards, and you'll see that you too have this intuition. What am I speaking about? Well, you can Google something like test your intuition of criminals, and you'll find that there are pictures of, say, 30 faces, 30 mugshots or 30 faces. And the test is trying to identify who are the criminals and who are not. Most people get 80% of the test right, maybe even 90% of the test right, that the criminals were indeed chosen. If say out of 30, there are 15 criminals, most people get 10 out of 15 right. Why? Because, I don't know, there's something in us, a soul, our intuition knows if we can block everything and just focus on the light emanating from the person or the darkness emanating from the person, we can know. Of course, the holiest people know immediately, but why is that? I dare ask. Part of there is maybe there are scientific explanations, but what the Tanya is teaching is because when we do evil, then it becomes a part of us, unfortunately. When we do teshuvah, by the way, that's when we erase evil from us completely. That's the power of teshuvah. That's the cleansing power of teshuvah. But it still has an effect upon us. And that this is what the Tanya is saying, and Rabbi Schnauz is explaining, that any of the abominable things hated by God, which are the klipot and sitra achra, other names for the source of evil, then they withdraw their nurture from terrestrial man and have their hold in him through the violation of the 365 prohibition. They hold us. They hold us captive. And that's why I find that there's a beautiful halachic term. It's just amazing. And this is what this reminds me of. But you know that the halachic term is tinok shenishba, which means a baby that was captured. And it's really found in a discussion of whether we can hold a Jew that has no knowledge of his Judaism, or maybe has a little bit knowledge of his Judaism, but doesn't know anything about the 248 commandments and the 365 negative commandments. And therefore, he transgresses a lot of commandments. Can he be held liable? Is he responsible for his sins? And Maimonides comes, and so many other come and say, no, he can't be held liable. Why? Because he's a tinok shenishba. He's like a baby who was captured. A baby, in other words, he's innocent. He doesn't know better. A baby in his knowledge. Captured by who? By those evil forces. Now, just as one can release himself from captivity, so too one can release himself from these evil forces. But it's a halachic term. It's one that, again, has halachic implications, legal implications in Judaism. Now, again, why? Because we believe that those evil forces capture us. That, by the way, explains why. It's just amazing. And the Tanya also elaborates on this in a different part of the Tanya. But why is something that is prohibited called asur in Hebrew? The word for prohibition is isur in Hebrew. That's because isur, asar, till today, what is a prisoner called in Hebrew? If you go to Israel and you visit prisoners, what are you visiting? Asir, asirim, same word. The word for prohibition is the same word as the word for prisoner. Why? Because it's those evil forces that imprison you. What is the word for permitted? The word for permitted is mutar, lehatir. What is that word in Hebrew? It's the same word as undoing a knot, lehatir kesher, to undo a knot, because the world of what is permitted is a world that is that undoes those knots, that is allowed, that is free. The word for, again, prohibition is a word that implies prison, because it's those evil forces imprisoning you. Again, just like a tinok shenishba. By the way, it goes to a whole different discussion, and that is that anyone who attempts to condemn people that are not following Judaism, that are Jewish and not following Judaism, are completely wrong. Not only are they wrong, but I would dare say that they are maybe even cruel, because those are tinokot shenishbu. Those are babies that were captivated. It's not their fault. You can't hold them liable according to halacha. Anyhow, so that's really the idea of evil imprisoning us. I feel like I'm monologuing today, so please feel free to say anything.
So when does it become the responsibility of the individual to learn? And do they need to know that they're supposed to learn? And also these Jews who look down on the Jews, are they Jewish supremacists?
I don't know. I have no understanding in terms, especially that they become so political. But I will say this: I think that it's a prohibition to say, I don't know, to not love your fellow as yourself. You know, I can pick one of the 613, as much as it is to look down upon these Jews, no doubt. But how does a person really change his status from tinok shenishba, from a baby that was captured, to a person that now needs to know and therefore goes and explores knowledge? That, I think, depends a lot on the circumstances of a person. A person can be living his entire life, and I've met many people like that. And really, it's not their fault. They don't know anything about Judaism because the circumstances of life really never presented themselves. Yes, a person should be proactive. Sometimes you don't even know what to be proactive about. And in a way, it's our duty here in this classroom, in this Zoom classroom, to reach out to those Jews and present it to them. You know, in the words of King David, it's a beautiful verse that says, Ta'amu ki tov Hashem. Taste and see how good God is. It's in a way our responsibility to create those Costco stands of God's food and say to people, hey, taste my food. Ta'amu ki tov Hashem. You could be shopping in Costco all life long and not encounter any stand like that. You'll encounter stands that sell cheese and sell wine and sell whatever. You know the shopping experience at Costco. But what about a stand that sells the food of God? Not many people, unfortunately, encounter that. And it's our duty, therefore, those who know Aleph should teach Aleph. Those who know Bet should teach Bet. To create those stands, those Costco stands, so to speak, to make people taste it. And I'm sure that when people taste it, especially those tinokot and ishbu, that were never privy to the delicious taste of God, then they'll immediately fall in love. And then they'll explore, and then they'll change their status from tinok shenishba to a person that now is engaged.
And isn't it that they not only fall in love with God, but fall in love with themselves?
Sure. And again, back to what we said, to the deepest part of themselves, right? To the God in them.
To the God soul.
Yeah, absolutely. To the God in. What does it mean? To that infinite soul, to that infinite potential, therefore. To that infinite heaven. And that they can't be defined by this world, but they have to be defined by the heaven in them. They can't be defined by the impossibilities. They have to be defined by the possibilities. They can't be defined by their negative traits, but rather by the divine traits. That's really what it means. Yeah. You know, Racheli Frankel, I've quoted this a lot, but Racheli Frankel is the mother of one of the three boys that are up here. She's the mother of this one, as you can see, of Naftali, right here. But She's been here multiple times, and shortly after, the 3 boys who were kidnapped and then murdered by evil terrorists in Israel in the summer of 2014. I asked her the question of, how do you continue to smile after losing a child like this? Are you not in pain? Are you not in tears? And she said, yes, I am in tears, but I don't become my tears. I am in pain, but I don't become my pain. And in a way, I think that's the ultimate relationship one should have with themselves. That you know deep inside that you can't be defined by tears. You can't be defined by pain. Why? Because you have a divine soul. That's the only thing that should be defining. Yes, so you suffer. She suffers more than anyone maybe suffer. To lose a child in such a way is unfathomable. But on the other hand, she also is such a holy woman, really, that she knows that she's not defined by that pain. She's defined by God, by the soul, by the heaven in her. So anyway, that's that ultimate relationship. Yeah. 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 I'm terribly sorry. I'm going to take a 30-second pause because there are people, I'm getting a text, people waiting at the door to enter because we have a Rosh Chodesh minyan. So I'm going to go back and forth. I'll be right back. Right back.
My son is coming in.
All right, I'm sorry. Anyhow, so any other comments? Otherwise, we can continue. No? All right, let's continue then at the bottom here of 129. Indeed, man is Kalipa. Kalipa, by the way, and let me explain these 2 terms so that because they're going to repeat themselves quite a bit. But these 2 terms that refer really to the evil forces. So you have the term of Kalipot and you have the term of Sitra Achra. Kalipot means peels. It's literally what it means. And it's an interesting term, but it goes back to the word asur, imprison, prohibition and imprison. Why? Because just like a peel imprisons the fruit, all right, think of an orange, think of a banana, think of whatever it may be. You have that peel that imprisons the fruit. So too, that evil imprisons the goodness. It's a fascinating term because I wish everyone could see their evil, their personal evil in such a way that it's not necessarily a part of your inner you. Inside you, all you have is a fruit. It's a part of your external you, like a peel. Now all you have to do is to teshuvah and peel that peel away. That's klipot, and that's what when those evil forces imprison a person, that's when the klipot really come and almost control the person. So that's the term klipot. The term sitra achra is another term for that evil that God created. Sitra achra is an Aramaic term. Sitra means side and achra means the other. So what it means, it's the other side. You have the positive, divine side, and then you have the other side. It's interesting to note that both these terms, klipot and sitra achra, don't imply evil, the word evil. Why? Because it might connect to this big idea in Judaism, and we're very careful with what we say. And if we don't have to say a negative word, we don't say it. So we'll call it the other side. We won't call it the evil side. We'll just call it the other side. Lubavitcher Rebbe, by the way, was very careful about what he said. And he would use that term often, not just the term of sitra achra, but whenever he would speak about evil, he would say the opposite of good. Hefech hatov. Even if that meant that he would have to use more words, he could just say evil, one word, ra. But he would say hefech hatov, the opposite of good, because again, we're careful with what comes out of our mouth. So that term, sitra achra, the other side, does not say the evil side because we have to be careful. So we just say the other side. But that again is another term that implies evil. By the way, we see this in this coming parsha, in the portion of Noah. God follows that rule too. And we're about to read this coming Shabbat about the flood and how God commanded Noah to assemble all of the animals, right? We're all familiar with that. And bring them into the ark for the survival of God's creatures. And he asked that the kosher animals should come in 7 by 7, the non-kosher 2 by 2. Now, the way God refers to the non-kosher animal is not he didn't tell Noah, bring in the impure animals 2 by 2, but rather he said, Et habeima asher enena tehora, which means the animal that is not pure. Instead of saying the animal that is pure, God is saying, bring in the animal that is not pure. By the way, again, forced God to use more words. He could have said et habeima atemea, which means the impure animal. Instead, he said et habeima asher enena tehora, 3 more words, or 2 more words, because tehora and temea interchange. So maybe 2 more words. God used extra words to say, bring in the animals that are not pure. Why? Because God follows what he teaches us. And that is that if we have to be careful with our language, he too has to be careful with his language. And instead of saying impure animals, he says the animals that are not pure. And waste words, so to speak, to go the extra mile and only speak positivity. So we learn that from God. Now you can ask, if we want to elaborate, well, you can ask, well, if you fast forward to the laws of kashrut, of what is kosher and what is not kosher, the animals that are kosher, God does use the word impure there. So God is inconsistent with his teaching, seemingly at least. But the answer is this. The story of Noah, of the flood, is a story. It's not laws. It's not God telling us this is kosher, this is not kosher. It's a story. So when you're telling a story, you can remain vague. But if you have to teach laws, be as clear as possible. And if you have to use tamea, yes, it's not good to use it, but to teach a law, then do it, so that you don't leave room for doubt. So that's where that positive language can take a little twist, if it's for the sake of clarity of law. Okay.
So a question. So
yeah,
do we need to have evil in our lives? Can we survive without evil?
You mean in our world or in our life?
In our world.
Oh,
in our life and the world, both.
So in a way, like I said, I think there's 2 answers to that. Number one, in a way, God created it to give us freedom of choice. Life would be very robotic without evil in the world. On the other hand, and that's the second answer, that also God created the world not just for us to have it and therefore to exercise freedom of choice, but also for us to be proactive about it and in a way conquer it and expel it.
And so in doing so, we become closer to God.
Absolutely. We become partners with God, because at the end of the day, God put us in this world to heal it, to rectify it. We say this every day, to repair it in the kingship of God. Let's not forget the other words. Very often we use the term tikkun olam, which has become such an overused term. But where does it come from? It comes from the prayer in Aleinu that we say each and every day at the end of the prayer. Letaken olam b'malchut shakai, which means it's not just tikkun olam, repairing the world. That's nice and fluffy, but it's taken olam b'malchut shakai, to repair the world with the kingship of God. That's what tikkun olam really means, by infusing God in the world. And when we infuse God in the world, we in a way expel that darkness, and then we become closer to God, like you just said, or maybe partners with God. Yeah.
I think you have to also be a realist. When Isaiah said there'll be a day that the lamb will lie down with the wolf, when that day comes, I'd like to be the wolf, not the lamb.
That's what, there's a general in the Israeli army who said that. Let the Arabs be the lamb, I want to be the wolf. Yeah, very good. You remind me, going back to Noah, since it's apropos this week's portion, but this prophecy of the wolf, the V'gar ze'ev im keves, of the wolf who lived with the lamb, is a prophecy for Messianic times. The chief rabbi of Israel, Chief Rabbi Lau, on January 25th, 2020, not too long ago. Seems like ages ago because of the coronavirus. But he stood in front of the leaders of the world who came to Israel to commemorate the liberation of Auschwitz, 75 years since do you remember that? A big ceremony. Putin came to town and Mike Pence was there, all sorts of leaders. And he mentioned this prophecy and he said, well, it says that in Messianic times, the wolf will live with the lamb, but it's a trivia question. It actually already happened that the wolf lived with the lamb. When? In Noah's Ark. The wolf lived with the lamb. All these animals that are supposedly enemies with one another, they live together. Why? Rabbi Lai explained that's because the animals then understood that they were all in the same boat.
Literally.
And he told the leaders, you see, you could hate each other, but at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. And your signature can affect millions of people. So I ask you to bear that in mind when you go and sign all these documents. We're all in the same boat. Make sure your signature reflects that. It was a powerful statement that he made. But it's true. When we recognize that even the lamb or the wolf or the other is in the same boat, then we develop a different type, more loving type of relationship with him.
There's the story of the scorpion who had the turtle take him across the lake.
Yeah.
And the turtle said, well, why would I take you? Because you're going to sting me. And the scorpion said, well, if I sting you, we'll both go down.
Yeah.
And along the way, he stings the turtle. The turtle turns around and says, why did you do it? We're both going to die. And he said, that's my nature.
That's right. Sometimes you can overcome that nature if you understand again that you're in the same boat. Yeah, good story. You know, to conclude with this story, but Menachem Begin once took, I think it was Henry Kissinger or one a diplomat to the Jerusalem Zoo, and he said, you know, we're a year in Jerusalem and here we're fulfilling the prophecy of the wolf will live with the lamb. I'm about to show this to you. You'll see that in the cage of the wolf, there is a lamb. It's Messianic times here in Israel. And he shows him the wolf living with the lamb. And Henry Kissinger can't believe it. He says, wow, that's quite amazing. How do you achieve this feat? He said, it's very easy. Every day we change lambs. All right, friends, we'll conclude here, but really we should learn to live even with the other. And most importantly, if that other is the other side, then we should try and transform it into good, so that eventually those messianic times should come about, because the time has come, right, Jordan? The time has come. It happened.